Thank you all for joining us. My name is Julie Grenier, and we're going to be talking today about film and television. And we have a very exciting group of people here with us today. So a little bit about myself. I'm Director General of Takamut Nupingat. We are in Nunavik. We broadcast television and radio for almost 50 years. It'll be 50 years next year, 100% in the Inuktitut language. And we are one of the founding member societies of APTN as well. I also am the acting chair of the board of APTN. So I'm going to invite everybody actually to just introduce themselves, where you're from, tell us a bit about what you do and maybe some of the projects you have going on and exciting things you'd like to talk about.
Hello. Hello, I'm Tom McLeod. I'm Umagamut Inuyelok from the Invalid Settlement region. I'm co-CEO of Inuit TV. We are the regional educational broadcaster of Nunavut, and we broadcast a 15-hour day across the north in about 80% Inuktitut language. So yeah, I'm here with Inuit TV.
Lindsay, Lindsay McIntyre. I am Inuk. My family is from Qinnirajaattuq and Inuksuk, and I'm also settlers Scottish on the side. And I live in Vancouver, where I teach film at McLeod, University of Art and Design. Filmmaker and artist. I've been making films for about 25 years. Mostly experimental documentary, and now sort of moving into narrative production as well.
My name is Jessica Brown. I'm a Numatsi vote beneficiary. Born and raised in Labrador, currently living and working in St. John's, Newfoundland. I'm a single mom of 2 boys. I own a production company, and I also provide mentorship and training opportunities to Indigenous youth in Atlantic Canada through my nonprofit, the Northern Film Initiative. So far, I've worked on 3 television series that I produced and directed. I also write, and I have a number of different projects in development currently, which are really exciting.
Hey, my name is Nyla Innuksuk. I'm a filmmaker. I currently live in Toronto. My mom is settler Canadian. My father is from Inuksuk. My first feature that I directed was an alien invasion movie called Slashback, which was a really crazy learning experience for me and for the girls that I made the movie with. But it was really wonderful, and so I'm currently developing my second feature in prep, and we're planning to film in February, and I'm developing a Slashback series with some really cool people and a documentary about the Franklin ships and the, some of the interesting things going on there. Yeah, and a few other fun projects, and working with awesome artists that I've gotten to connect with here also, which has been wonderful.
Hi, my name is Siku Allooloo. I'm Inuk from Mi'kmaq through my father, and Haitian and Taino from Haiti through my mother. I grew up in Yellowknife, and I live on Vancouver Island now. I'm a visual artist, a poet, and more recently, a filmmaker. I'm working on my first feature documentary, and as well as an art exhibition and a book, and I've just become a new mom. So yeah, lots of creation in my life.
Wonderful. So I'm hoping to have a bit of I guess like an organic conversation, and you know, if we come into questions, we'll come into questions, and I invite everyone to just kind of have some important conversations, and I guess I'll get us started a little bit, and I wanted to, I guess, start with to talk about the fact first of all, the fact that we're here and the fact that we're able to be, as film and documentary TV producers, actually being able to participate in an art conference, because it's not always been the case, and to be included in this art space. So I guess wanted to open that up and get your thoughts on that and the importance of that for you all in each of your own work worlds and industries. So I'm not going to point at any of you, so I'll allow somebody to start and then go from there.
I think art and film and television, they're all very parallel tracks of life. It's all storytelling. And as Inuit, storytelling is so very ingrained into our souls. From the time we get our names breathed into us, we're hearing stories, we're telling stories. And some people tell stories through painting, some people tell stories through carving, and they're beautiful and amazing in the same way that television and film can be beautiful, amazing ways of telling stories. It's all a very parallel life track.
Yeah, I think for me, because I guess I sort of started life as an artist, it makes perfect sense to me that they're together, that they're one. I'm a process-based filmmaker, so my films are generally sort of artworks first, and then so it makes perfect sense to me. But we are also here to talk about some elements of industry, and I think that's a different thing that we can talk about that there is. Inuit film industry. That's a pretty significant thing, and maybe more so than, isn't it amazing it's included in this conversation? It's more like, isn't it amazing we can have that conversation at all? Yeah.
And I think even within the industry, it's like making movies is such a team sport. This is what I've realized is a big part of my job is actually managing really talented artists. and so it's actually, I get the chance to work with really talented people who are experts at what they do in this very specific thing. Like Davis, my friend here, is like an expert nerd. And I can talk to him and have these really creative conversations, and it's like, and we can be doing things and so it's kind of about or it's, you're working with amazing fashion designers or production designers. There's artwork that's involved in my next movie. There's a gallery exhibit it's just a scene in the film that will have to have Indigenous art in the exhibit. And there's choreography that has to happen between our lead actors that will require dancers, and so it's such a collaborative space, and so and that's actually where a lot of the magic comes from. So even being here today, and I was Sim's been helping me out with a project, and being able to connect this week with sewers that I've been having conversations with for months about designing specific looks for characters, where we're having a chance to really talk about the character, and then because we're like, the character would probably wear your clothes, what do you think she would wear? And then being able to just empower the artists that you're working with to be bringing their best, not necessarily telling them what to do, but then it's also with this goal of moving in this same direction. So it's actually, so much of it is this, for me at least, this, I think when I was growing up, I saw directors as these auteurs that just had to know everything. And, but then for me, it's been quite nice to realize that it can actually be much more collaborative than that. And my little brother, who does some directing too, he sometimes says that people who think that that their auteurs are often overvaluing their role in the project. And so I think, it is so much about working with different artists in these spaces. And for me, that kind of work, the creation work, is trying to foster a space where that is the thing, where the making of the thing is the thing, not just this end goal of getting the most viewers or whatever, fitting into the algorithm or that sort of thing.
I think that it was really exciting for me when I was looking at all the people that were going to be involved in this symposium, how many of us are interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. And I think it's very Inuk style to have a symposium that is so expansive and like I fit myself, my practices through all these things, and they're like, I feel like it's imposed. Those categories are like, it's weird. I feel weird when I have to like fit in one, and I feel so much more comfortable being able to be my full self. And I think this symposium has made that space, and that very much is the practice of so many, especially Inuit artists. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And all of you touch on so many important topics. And it leads me to think about the mentorship that comes with a lot of these roles that we play, because it is a very, very niche group of people that we can work with, right? And so there's a lot of training, there's a lot of mentorship, so how do you tackle those challenges? And how do you, is there space for us to work more closely together? Like, how do you see the future moving into these expansive spaces? Because everybody does have, introducing, I think, ourselves as Inuit people, introducing ourselves as one thing is not feasible. I mean, every Inuk you speak to is so multifaceted, right? So, how do you see us moving forward with that?
I guess I could talk about mentorship because it's something that's really, really vital to what I do and to my practice. And I think that I have been making films for a long time, but I still don't feel like I've made it. Like I'm an expert or I know what I'm doing. But I know that there are some of the IQ principles in particular that mean a lot to me within my practice, and I think that maybe about 6 or 7 years ago I realized that I'm not going to get to a place where now I know everything and now I can turn around and help the people that are coming through the door behind me, but it's actually my job to hold open the door for others as I walk through it. And so even though I'm chaos and my practice is crazy and I'm always doing very many different things, I make sure that I'm involving others in the practice, like others who are learning, and mentoring people through whatever it is. So whether I'm making a note or hand processing film or animating something, that there are people that I'm bringing in, or people that maybe want to shadow in a director position, or they want help running a grant or something. Those are things that I can actually help with. And so so it's a process that I enter into with literally every project. And sometimes it's a little bit more casual. Sometimes it's really quite formal. Sometimes it's a 3-day mentorship. Sometimes it's a 2-year mentorship. But I think those things are really important because, and I teach this to my students too, especially when I'm teaching specific urban knowledge that isn't as easy to get in a lot of places. It's that once you have some of this knowledge, once you're in this, that it's also your job to share that as you move through stages of things. So that mentorship component is really, really important. And I do try to ensure that it's Inuit or Indigenous folks that I'm mentoring, and through whatever program that I can, and making sure that it's that they're paid mentorships is also a really important part of it, because there's a labor involved in everything.
Mentorship for my journey personally was so important. I had some really amazing mentors that helped me get my start in the industry, and I really felt like I hit the ground running. So then I used my platform to uplift my community, and on my film sets, I always create space for emerging filmmakers from my community. And I just think that, as you grow as an artist, it doesn't matter what discipline you're in, but holding that space for the next person and holding the door open is really important. And that, we can all lift each other up and work together.
I also have a production company that I had to incorporate in order to keep the rights to my feature film I'm working on. And I am not trained in, I'm not trained in anything I work in, actually. And so, mentorship has been how I've learned everything, and also just by doing and by trial and error. With having taken on this responsibility and legal obligations and fiscal obligations, that is a really steep learning curve. And in addition to the actual work of being a producer, and it's been very, very hard to find mentors, especially Indigenous mentors. Most of the Indigenous filmmakers that I have sought out over 3 years of working on my project, they're all in such high demand. They're all writing and directing and producing their own work, and have so many projects and so much responsibility, and not the capacity to be able to take on more. And that actually has been a barrier in certain funding circumstances, like with programs that I think are created with a lot of best intention, trying to institute a best practice of okay, an Indigenous production should have Indigenous producers. And in my situation, the co-producer I'm working with is she's the co-producer of my dreams. She's very spiritually aligned. I feel like we were meant to be together in this whole journey, and she's white. And I was prevented from being able to access this one specific Indigenous funding, that's national funding. And the reason was because I had a white co-producer, and it didn't matter that I myself am an Indigenous producer on my own project. And the reality is that without finding this other mentor, I would have no mentorship. And I also feel personally, I don't know if insulted is the word. It's not insulted. I feel diminished, my sovereignty as an artist is capped, because I am prevented from being able to work with who I want to be able to work with. And not everybody shares the same values, or not everybody, film is so personal. When you're leading a story, and especially in my case, it's an extremely personal story. It's a family story. It's now become my own journey, has made its way into the story itself. And I'm working with cultural history and for storytelling form. All of that is so extremely personal. I need to be able to have the decision-making authority to work with the people that are the right fit. And in my case, it's kind of I'm learning about barriers as I go along. And yeah, it's awesome. I mean, of course, I want Indigenous mentors, but we're also busy, and basically people are breaking through the doors, we just started breaking through the doors. And yeah, it's a challenge, I find.
Yeah, I agree. It is really hard to try and break into an industry that's really hard and then also at the same time be mentoring and trying to also get, for myself, the first time I ever stepped on set was on the set of on a union project, was my own feature film. And it was terrifying to be working with all of these people that all they do is make movies on sets all day. And I was the least experienced. I was the director of the project, but the least experienced person on set. And it was a crazy amount of responsibility. I had these young kids that were very much looking up to me and relying on me. And then, but what the good thing is, like what you said, this is very early. We've only just been starting to get to be able to tell our own stories and have these mentorship programs. And the difference between what we're able to do this time with my film compared to with Slashback, where everybody was like, Sim has tons of experience now. He doesn't need to be mentored. He can be hired and for a position. The Deandra, who is my hair person, she's a union hair person and can do key hair. She doesn't have to be a trainee anymore. So it's like progress is happening, and so it's there's also it's like. It's really hard to be in this industry, so I wouldn't necessarily say this job is for everyone. It's like you really have to be obsessed with movies or TV to want to do this, or telling a story. So I think that there's a lot of different ways, though, that we can be collaborating with community where people don't have to, like what I was mentioning with like for production designer or this Indigenous gallery exhibit that's going to be part of the film. We can be working with Indigenous curators and putting together a real exhibit that can kind of exist separately. And so there's so much room for different collaboration that can run on almost its own timeline. Like we've got, but that requires its own budget, and it's separate from the movie. And I think that's important too, because even within our costume research, it's like being able to just experiment without just being so focused on the end goal of having to have all these looks for this, and this. It's just like an opportunity for us to experiment together and try things out. And then when we get to the point of making the movie, then we've already got all these amazing looks, and everybody's just the collaboration has already happened. And then for me, it just feels really good to have all of these people from my community contributing, helping me make it, because it feels like I've got just this support from people, and that feels really nice.
Can I add something to that? Were you going to say something, Tom? I want to just respond to just that what you just said, because there's this idea, like that mentorship that's happening as production's happening, kind of what I was talking about, like as I walk through the door, as I'm in, learning these things, that we bring people on, right? And I'm still being mentored in things, right? So I'm like, yeah, I'm a professor and I've been doing it for 25 years, but I'm still being mentored as I'm mentoring other people. And it's a weird place to be both like a learner and sort of an expert in some ways. But some of those things, they're starting, right? So I'm doing a feature that's a period piece that'll be in the 1930s, and we need lots of garments from that time. And some of that knowledge, it's not something that everybody is carrying around, in their brain somewhere anymore. So setting up a workshop in the community where the story originally took place, where people are learning how to make the amatis and the things that we need for the production, and then using that as a way to then have the wardrobe or the costume for that. So then, then those people now have that knowledge, they can pass it on in other ways, and then they can, gain those skills. I think that's an important part of it, but I think the other piece about it is the way that we do things has to be really intentional, that it isn't just, you spoke a little bit about union sets, and they are very intimidating places, and I can't really believe what you did, Nyla, like walking onto that set, like being the first time you had ever really been on set. That's an incredibly terrifying thing to do. And I think that, the way that we can, at least as the people who are constructing the sets and determining kind of like the vibe of like, how do we do things? Do we start from a good place? Are we doing things in a good way? We start the day with an elder and have everybody on the same page about what we're doing collectively, and sharing in that responsibility, that it isn't like all on one person's shoulders to hold things, like to hold that whole vision. It's really, really collective, and just, it has to be really intentional, I think. Yeah.
And I think there is precedent that's being set as we kind of continue to make things, and even in the U.S. with Sterling Harjo's show Reservation Dogs, the things that they're able to do on that show are really special. And in the U.S., they really don't, they don't really think about these things, but they made, because Sterling and Taika and the other people that were involved in that show made it, it said that it was really important that all the directors be Indigenous, that everyone in the writers' room be Indigenous, and then they made this great, the product was great. And so it just showed that that this is something that can balance both things. It can be reflective of a real experience and then also be something that everybody wants to watch.
Just on mentorship, as everyone here is saying, film and television is so experience-based. Like, you can go to film school and you can learn how to say your f-stop and your shutter speed to go and like give yourself a certain look, but until you're on set and you're doing things and like you're actually learning in place, it's really hard to wrap your head around what's actually going to happen on a set. So if you are looking to get into this industry and this field, it doesn't have to be perfect where you start. Like, when I first started my ED and the person who taught me camera craft, they were white men. And I brought my own Inuit worldview to the things that I created within that. But that is where like I learned my technical craft in the field and on set, was sort of in that environment, because that was all that was available to me. And all of us here, there's different shades of similar things that happen. And even though like that starting point isn't perfect, just getting in, getting your hours in, and like getting your experience in is important, and that's worth it, finding that mentorship and that experience where you can. Because this is a field where you need that. You can't come in and use like your book learning to make a movie. It just doesn't usually work that way.
Yeah, I think you all mentioned some really important points, and so one of them is with the mentorship, working with a non-Indigenous person and the barriers that can bring, especially when you're looking to get funding, and then you have to look at numbers, and it sometimes seems like we don't have the same opportunities as the non-Indigenous filmmakers who don't have to meet those specific barriers necessarily, and while we have to. So it's like an unfair kind of criteria, because like Tom, like you just said, sometimes, especially in the very technical space, you have no choice but to work with the people that are there for you. And sometimes you connect with a person that it doesn't matter who they are, as long as you feel comfortable and you're connecting with them, then you're able to learn, right? So you're able to, and there are so many other barriers like that. There are so many other challenges that we have to face. What are some of the, I guess, tools and tips that you can provide that would help work around some of those, or even ideas that you have that as a group, across Inuit Nunangan, that we can potentially develop or work on?
I think one of the important tools that is actually like a tool is the on-screen protocols and pathways document that a Moderator in the Indigenous Screen Office put together a number of years ago. That is, it's literally a guide to how to deal with, protocol, and not just like protocol in a formal sense, but how do you need to frame thinking about working with Indigenous stories or Indigenous ideas or cosmology or anything. And it's an amazing place to start. There's a number of other documents that expand on that, but I think it does go back a little bit to how we do things. And like Siku, what you were talking about how you were prevented from accessing funding because you had a non-Indigenous producer. Like that, I've talked to lots of people on both sides of that conversation of like, everybody's got to be Indigenous, and therefore it's not. And it really doesn't seem fair, but there are also lots of reasons why that's in place. And I think I don't want to see barriers in front of people. There's already so many barriers that we are constantly having to figure out, what size and shape is it, and how do I get around it, and what even is it? And then to be putting up more of them is a really, really frustrating thing. But I think there are ways to frame, how we do things that can take us into a different kind of space. And I think, there's the industry, there's the machine. Like filmmaking is literally like a machine, and it operates in a particular way. And especially union or industry filmmaking, there are very, very efficient ways of doing things. And so, these people only talk to these people, and these people only do this job. And you can't touch that C-stand because that's not your job. Or you can step on people's toes in lots of different ways in that framework. But you can also maybe indigenize the process of making films so that it doesn't have to abide by all of those things. Like that works for that thing, but there are other ways of working, and we have incredible examples of Inuit and Indigenous filmmakers who are doing this. And Zacharias Kunuk obviously is a very strong example of that, with Qinnirajaattuq, how that community was created around that film, how that community made that film, learned all the things that they needed to learn to be able to do it, and it was like almost an all Inuit production. I had a chance to work with Zach out in Isumu when I lived here in Montreal years ago, and it was the very first time that I was ever on an all Inuit film crew, and it was incredibly intentional. We were recording the testimonies of residential school survivors, and 10 years before they did it at the TRC, and it was really, really important to go to those people, to have them be able to speak in their language and be in their own homes and be comfortable to talk about those stories. And other people are doing the same. Running from that, a Métis filmmaker from Winnipeg created a film set that I was lucky enough to be a part of called Saint-Anne, and I was one of the cinematographers, and I was mentoring and teaching other people how to also be the cinematographers while we were filming. So I filmed part of it, and then when I left, those people took over with those skills and contributed as an equal, not as I'm the boss and it's my vision and you have to shoot things the way that I say because it's my vision, but we actually shared in that vision. And it was an all Indigenous production. It was all female, all Indigenous production. And it was an incredible experience. It was better than anything I've ever done in other realms, but it was so intentional, and it was so not the industry. And in fact, maybe it couldn't have entered into some of those national funding competition type things because of its alternative nature. But I think we have to make those things happen in the world, and then the world can catch up to us. I don't think we need to be modeling what we do on the way the world thinks things need to be done. We have to do things the way that we need to do them, and it's a narrative sovereignty thing,
Yeah, I think that's important. Just to know that there's lots of ways to make movies, and so it can be the ISO now has a cap of up to $750 for production funds, which is pretty great. And $750,000, and so you could be making something that's I think there are there's so many different ways to tell a story, and that I think what we're so lucky in Canada to have. Although I do feel it kind of shrinking, is that we've said that it's important to us to support with public funds artwork that's not that's just reflective of who we are as Canadians. The NFB, I personally have noticed, has been moving away from that direction in a way that worries me. CBC is also moving their documentaries away from docs towards lifestyle programming, and I do think that if we've already said that as a culture that we want to be supporting publicly funded art that maybe isn't super commercial, that we actually be doing that. And so yeah, I think it's storytelling, and I do think we as humans, you know, we need to tell stories to understand how we feel about the world. And then also, if we can express that, then maybe other people can better understand us, or maybe feel like, oh wow, someone else feels like that as well. So yeah, I think that being able to just be open to the different ways projects can come together, and that it not always be so focused on this. I mean, and that's not to say, like, for all projects it's kind of different, but when you work in community, you have to be considerate of, there's just all these other things that are not worth messing up for a TV show. Do you know what I mean? And so I feel like we know that, but it's hard for people sometimes from the outside to understand when we say that.
I'm experiencing something like within filmmaking that I didn't anticipate, and it stokes my fire, but it's also very frustrating because I also have an activist background, and so I'm finding that in so many instances I'm having to advocate for narrative sovereignty, or had to start a production company to keep the rights to my own film so that somebody doesn't have a final say over what the film is. And one thing that's really cool is actually that there's so many changes happening all the time with different funds and just different parts of the industry where there are advisory councils and policy changes, and those sites of activism are they might not be immediate all the time, but it really has been helpful to speak with other filmmakers and other people that work in other areas of the industry, because there is this kind of it creates tension, it creates momentum, and it also helps when we're co-creating the industry together. There's so many more Indigenous people in working at places like Telefilm or Creative BC, or and the Indigenous Green Office is a huge asset, and building relationships with people that are pushing so hard to be able to have funding and space and all of those things. It's a really incredible time to get into filmmaking. And so yeah, it's you have to be incredibly relentless and very, very, very just believe in yourself and in your vision. But it is a communal thing, and it's not just when you're in the process of making what you're making, it's lean on your community of people, build a community of people, because there are people that we all want these changes and they're important, but we need each other to move forward.
So on sort of what everyone has been saying, sets that are not too industrial, sets where there's narrative sovereignty, studios where Indigenous people are always the story and always the focus. There are communication societies across Inuit Nunavut, like the one Julie works at, the Inuit Communication Society, Inuit Broadcasting Corporation, TNI, Ukalatakit. Every region in Inuit Nunavut has its own communication society that is there to create Inuit television, and for a lot of them, they've been running since the 80s. And they all need Inuit producers, all of them, right now, today. So if you want to work in any sort of Inuit broadcasting, Inuit film, Inuit television, Inuit publication, Inuit radio, these communication societies exist today. They're all run by Inuit. They're all, a lot of them are staffed primarily by Inuit, and they need Inuit television professionals. So if you want to work in television, radio, publication, and you want to live within Inuit Nunavut, it is possible to do today within these communication, these not-for-profit societies. It's maybe not as glitzy and glamorous as film. Television never is. But it's there today, and it is an amazing place for young people to go and learn and be a part of your culture while working within the industry.
I've got a question for you. Are you guys the ones that just got the CRTC?
That was Uvugu TV.
Oh, okay. So you guys don't have money for me?
There's something I just remembered I wanted to say as an answer to your question, Julie, and something you said. The extra things that we have to do as Inuit or Indigenous filmmakers or producers. There's that extra step, that thing, that barrier that's been sort of like put up in front of you, Siku. But then there's also things that we do have to do and it is being recognized. The ISO, for example, is doing research into this and helping to make it known that when we're telling a story, there's more work that we have to do. No matter what, I'm making a film that's about my family, and I need to do it in a good way. It has to be responsive and responsible to my community, and so that development time, like the machine of film production, you can go like write a script and then shoot it and then edit it and then show it, and it's not that simple. The development time for this story is very, very, very long, and the recognition of that idea that it's not like I'm not going to like parachute into the community and go, hey, somebody please think, here's my script, like, and take, right? It can't be extractive, and so that time that we have to sometimes take with our families or our communities to be telling the story in a good way is really critical, and it's not a bit you get to just skip over when you're telling an Inuit story. And so that's something that is being recognized, and they're supporting that. The funders are supporting that. There's this much longer. It's not just consultation, it's like co-creation. And if I go, by the end of that process, and my community says, no, then that's not the story I'm going to tell. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to tell a different story because that matters more than, the bums and seats or, making money off of a production. There's no money in this, by the way, you guys. Yeah. That's not really true, but it's stuff we have to do. So those things have to also be recognized. Yeah.
Yeah, a few of you have mentioned the ISO, and they've definitely been making huge strides to help the Indigenous film and television industry. And I don't know if anyone's here, but anyways, hats off to them and they're still fighting for more. So I think that we are pretty lucky to have a resource like theirs, and some of the opportunities that they're presenting towards, because we've talked about mentorship and we've talked about many different things, but introducing, and like I hear Tom kind of giving a call out for come and apply to work with us and give us your names, and I think that talking to the youth, I mean the Inuit population is very, very high youth concentration, and but it is an industry though where you have to wear many hats. It's just part of the reality. So it can be very tiring, it can be very exhausting, and so like how do you I guess kind of sell that opportunity to the youth? We do want more youth to come into this world, and we need them because they have a different perspective and they have a different way of telling stories. And so, like, what would you do, or how do you see that being like the way to engage them to jump on ship?
You let them know that they're seen and that they're being listened to, and that if you are working in your own project as a Inuk youth, that there are Inuit out here who want to help you and who don't want to take your vision and twist it and make it into something commercially viable. We want to, as I feel like I can speak for all of us here, we're as industry professionals, Inuit industry professionals, we want to help young people come into this film and television world and tell your stories. Not some story that sounds like yours, but maybe it can like make $1 million on Netflix, you know? We care about your stories and we want to hear them and we want you to be able to tell them. And if you're trying to work your way into this film and television industry, find a Inuk film and television professional and they'll help you. And they won't try to, you know, wring the dollars out of you. They'll help you.
But even if you have an idea for Netflix, you can also reach out and we can help you and we won't try to take your ideas or money.
And it's pretty interesting, isn't it, when you have a conversation with a person, whether they're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, and sometimes you're just telling a story, and they look at you and it's like, wow, you can make a movie out of that. It's like, oh, but that's just what happened to me, like, last week, you know? So you don't think, but the greater world actually sees our stories as stories that need to be told because it's so foreign to them. So there's an element there where there are no bad stories. I think that we have an opportunity to really, you know, tell our own narrative sovereignty. I mean, that's where it's at, right? And like opening that space.
And I think, you know, everybody has stories, and it's and our stories are important, and we need to tell our stories. You know, if we don't tell our stories, then they die, because this is how we have subsisted and existed for, you know, thousands of years, is through stories. And so this is just another form of storytelling, and it's one where you can reach a lot of people. So it's really powerful. But learning how to translate that, you know, story of did this last week into these weird sort of like there's you know, kind of rules around how things work or how information is conveyed, like a language we all speak and understand, but being able to do that, like, you know, take something and edit it together so that it means a thing. It's a skill, and so you have to practice that for a while.
And all the kids have it because they're on TikTok.
I think stuff. I think the thing is, like, what I want is for people to them to be able to tell their own stories, like Tom said, but I want them to be able to tell their stories the way they want to tell them. And so as a person who I teach people how to make films, I'm constantly conscious of that, because, you know, I have classes where I need to teach people, like, this is how the industry works, and here's like set protocol. But ultimately, like, I don't want to be the person saying, like, you need to do this first, and your story needs to look like this, and it has to have this kind of an arc, or else it's not a story, right? It has to be the way that those stories need to be told, rather than like fitting into the mold of, you know, it's not a Robert McKee version of a story, then it's not a story, right? So I think that is a really critical component, and I think that the youth and the young people are really coming forward with that sense of, like, you know, they don't even know anything about the film history anymore. Like, you can not mention a movie that they've ever heard of if it, like, isn't on TikTok. Then, you know, they have a different way of communicating, and it's really exciting. There's a lot of amazing things that are happening that are, you know, you call them industry, not industry, but alternative ways of working with media and communicating things. Like IM4 is doing, you know, like AR, VR, you know, there's different ways of engaging, and Indigenous people and Inuit especially are just like taking those things and running away with them. It's an amazing thing. The screen is a colonial thing. It was a class I teach called Decolonizing the Screen, and it has been this very colonial space. But then there's these other ways of thinking about making media that maybe, you know, aren't contaminated by that I think people are really embracing and doing amazing things with.
And I guess you can say you're in, and like by removing the word colonial into the narrative is you're really indigenizing your screen, you're indigenizing your space, and you're making it your own, even though you might be using those tools that were developed.
Although I have had people, non-Indigenous people, tell me like, oh yes, because this is a colonial medium, you probably are used to telling stories differently. And it's like, dude, I grew up on Spielberg. So it is, I feel like just that there's so many ways, that there's so many ways to make stuff and tell stories.
I think for me, working with the youth is creating a collaborative and safe environment where the youth feel like they're a part of, this whole creation process. What I like to do on set is, when I'm working with the youth, ask them what do they think. Sometimes the best suggestions can come from them, and it's like this moment where it's like, I haven't thought of that, but that's a really great idea. And sometimes, like, I have used it, which was amazing. And I'm the oldest in my family of 5 siblings. And my youngest brother, he comes on film sets with me. So I think that's why, like, just holding that space for the youth, it's so important. And often we get invited to like different festivals and industry markets and things like that. And I think people, like, they might get annoyed with me because I'm always like, can I bring a +1 or can I bring like 4 or 5 people? And I think it's important for youth to be in these spaces to hear, what the conversations are like and to build your network. And for me, living on the East Coast in a very isolated region, traveling and going to different markets and putting myself out there, which felt really scary, because a lot of people in film, we like working behind the scenes and behind the camera. We don't like kind of, taking up that space, but you kind of just have to.
So I'd like to move on to opening the floor for other questions, but before we do that, is there anything like somebody in a earlier panel this week that I was on asked, like, what would you say to your younger self? Like so as a piece of advice that you can give to others, but also to your younger self, hindsight's always 20/20, so you got to have something that you feel might have helped you in your younger career path.
I think I probably would tell myself not to doubt myself so much, but like there's we've talked a number of different times. People have talked about imposter syndrome. Imposter as an Inuk. Am I Inuk enough to do this? Can I tell this story? Can I tell this story this way? Do I even know enough how to do these things? And so I've struggled and struggled and struggled and worked really, really hard. And I probably didn't need to work as hard as I did. I think that you have to trust yourself and know that you are enough and you are good enough and you are unique enough. And it's not to not be ashamed to not know something, to just go ask and somebody will help, because that's what we do. We help each other. That's how we survive.
Yeah, I would kind of echo that. I feel like when I was really young, I put a lot of pressure on myself, and also being in Inuk youth, there was always this idea from the time I was really young that there were social problems amongst Inuit youth, and that it was important to be a role model for your fellow Inuit. Like, it was like this kind of, and I can feel that with the young people, the young women I worked with on Slashback, and people in the press would ask them, how does it feel to be a role model? And I kind of would be like, they're not role models, they can mess up if they want to, It's like, you don't have to be perfect, and you can make mistakes, and I feel like for me, I put so much pressure on myself and felt, and then I got really sick. I developed alcoholism. I was always trying to be the most for everyone, and at a certain point while I was dying, I had to get a liver transplant, and it was just this wake-up call for me of like, I'm stressing out about all of these things and none of them matter. And it's like, what really matters are, your relationships, and like you said, the how things are being made, not just like what you're doing, but how you're doing it. And I'm so grateful for that time to kind of have that perspective shift. And then and at the time I was also preparing to make Slashback, but I was going to be writing it and producing it. And there was a white guy that was going to be directing it. And when I found out I was just too afraid because I had never directed before. And I thought, oh, I can't direct this movie, even though it was teenage girls fighting aliens. Like, I mean, I grew up, it was like, it couldn't be something that, but when I got sick, that was when I was able to say, like, what am I afraid of? Like, that I'm going to be bad at it? Or it's just like, so being able to put yourself out to try things, mess up, that you don't have to be perfect, that, and like you were saying also, that just like, just experiment. And when I was a kid, I was really lucky, because even for me, I knew I loved movies. I just loved them. But I also, as an Inuk, I was feeling like, is that important enough? Like, should I become a therapist or something? I was just like feeling like it wasn't giving back in a way that would be meaningful, especially because I liked horror movies and silly movies, and I thought that I should be making activist films or heavy dramas. But for me to kind of be able to just shed a bit of that stuff and just try something out, and so I had to tell this guy that I had brought on to be the director that I was going to be directing it if I got better. And then 4 months after my transplant, I went up and shot a little proof of concept with these teenage girls who ended up acting in the movie, and it was just us believing in this idea that we could make a movie someday, and we just have to find the right people to help us, and we did. And it was like, and none of us knew how to make a movie. I was doing this with a group of 13-year-olds and like an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old, but we found the right people, and and it was just this really wonderful experience. And throughout it, it was, it is about a story about girls realizing that they have something to fight for and making that choice to fight. And so it was just, for me, it was an important thing for me to process, I needed to get it out. And that's kind of how I feel also about my next movie. It's just it's a way for me to kind of process some things that I've been dealing with, especially just with identity and working in this industry that I feel sometimes requires me to capitalize on my indigeneity to be successful. Which it's also just been so helpful here in these spaces to talk and see that other people are struggle with these things as well. So I'm really grateful for this experience.
I would say to my younger self, and it wasn't that long ago actually, I'm still pretty young. A lot of opportunities are going to pop up. There's so much happening now. It's more exciting than ever, I think, for Inuit artists. Don't burn yourself out, because I've experienced burnout, and it is so real. I'm a single mom of 2 boys, and then on top of that, I'm a producer, and it's just like, that exhaustion, so real. So not every opportunity is a good opportunity, and think, how does this benefit me as an artist? And if it's not benefiting me, then maybe it's not for you. Like, just be a little more selective about like where your energy goes. I think that's really important.
Write more outlines. That's the one thing I'd go back and tell younger me. Coverage is great, but just write more outlines. Have that plan in place for what you're doing, because when you go out and you do so much and then you put it all together and it doesn't quite fit, that happens and it's fine. But having that outline ahead of time, even when you're just young and experimenting and working, it's worth it.
That's such good advice. You always think you can just wing it.
I never write outlines. I never write my outlines. I don't have to follow rules. If I write an outline, then I'm making rules for myself that I have to follow. So.
Thank you. I would tell myself to really just trust my instincts, and that the stories, in my case, the story that I desperately want to tell, is worth telling. That if you just have something that you need to do, and even if you have no idea how to do it, like Inuit are we're so adaptable, we're so ingenious, we're so just like, we come from people that make the most incredible things out of like things that nobody would ever think you would be able to make something substantial with, you know? And I've always just really, really loved who we are and who we come from. I've always just felt so incredibly proud to be Inuk, and just so inspired by our culture and our people. And so I think that like we really are living at a time where there is so much support and incentive for us to share these stories and to really, really trust your instincts, because it's not going to come from outside in. It has to come from inside out.
Thank you all so much. So do we have, are there any questions? We have about 7 minutes left, so over there.
It was in reference to something that you mentioned in the center about how you like to drag the kids on set or whatever. I remembered, I think it was Embassy of Imagination who had given out phones, you know, the cell phones or whatever, I think at the time maybe cameras that had video possibility to the kids and let them take them home. And then at the end of the week or so, compile something together. I'm just wondering if any of you have seen or heard of that kind of situation with the young ones, like we're seeing around here, you know, that have a chance to partake in a loose fashion, not necessarily with a construct, you know. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I've done a program with the youth where, you know, they've been taught that everybody is a filmmaker and you don't need, you know, a camera that's thousands and thousands of dollars to tell a story. You could use your smartphone, or, you know, you could use a GoPro, things that are accessible, and you can put it together, and that film can actually, you know, you can enter it into film festivals like Imaginative. It can travel around the world. So, you know, film is a very powerful tool. It's a form of self-expression, and you know, I think it's important to share these stories and to empower the youth to do that. So I really like that you mentioned about the iPhones, because, you know, everybody has one, or most, I should say. And you can use an iPhone, and everyone has access to YouTube. I mean, Google's at our fingertips, right? So film can be this big, you know, well-oiled machine, but it can also just be someone with a phone who's putting it together. So, you know, it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Hello, thank you so much for everything that you've given to us. And I wanted to say that in response to, I think you were saying about something should I be doing this? Should I be making, you know, documentaries, or should I be more of an activist type thing? The word should, for me personally, is really dangerous, because that's how I like stop myself. I go, should I try to do that? I mean, shouldn't I be following this path, or I should be doing that instead of this? And that word should can be dangerous. But when we just go, I'm going to,
Yeah.
right?
I think that's really important. Also, when I've been working with young women, I do think it's so important. I mean, young men too, but it's this, trusting yourself.
Yeah. And it takes, I mean, it's life experience to get to the place where you can go, yeah, I'm going to do this. And that can be terrifying, right? So thank you to all of you for your work in this industry. As a classical musician, I held myself back for decades thinking, like, I'm not a composer. I didn't study composition. I don't have a university degree. I'm not qualified. And then I became a mother, and, you know, I'm now in my 50s, and around 5 years ago, is when I decided, like, I'm I'm going to write songs. I'm going to do them my way. And the people who say that that's not right or the best way to do it, that's their problem, because I want to do that. So I'm really pushing myself out of those boundaries. And I'm actually, my brother, who is an electric guitarist, like a really cool guy, he and I have always wanted to do something together. So we applied for funding, and we're actually going in the recording studio soon to make an album of more, I don't know how to, more like ambient kind of music. So like electric guitar, vocals, but not my classical type singing, just like normal singing, throat singing, sounds from nature's, sounds from nature. He's got like all these pedals I know nothing about, but he's like always going, listen to this. And our goal, making this album, is actually in the hope that it would be considered for use in film and TV. Because as a musician, I mean, and I love TV, I love movies, I love documentaries. Music is such an important part of it. And I'm just like, it would be such an honor to have something to contribute to that.
Yeah, and I think that there's so many, that's the great thing about movies, is there's so many different types of art that have to go into it. And I mean, I had the real privilege of working with both this amazing composer that does kind of traditional scores, but then also a Tribe Called Red, or Hallucination is now what they're called. And to kind of be able to have that time to be able to have them, again, it's just like having your friends support you in that way. It just made it so special. Yeah.
So my question is kind of selfish, but it's because I know nothing about anything, how it all works, and so I'm just putting it out there. How does one get one's music out there to be considered?
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, how do you get music out there? It's like, I think that obviously telling filmmakers you've got some music and sending it over. Like, I want to hear it. Yeah, send it over when you got it, for sure. It's and I think that's a big part of it is, and if there is anyone that's interested in exploring their artistic practices in film or curious about that, you are more than welcome to send me an email or anything like that. And if you have questions, I'm always around to chat.
Yeah, I think you have to reach out to people. I've just been in contact with people, and even just for filmmakers, if you're making work and you met another filmmaker, you met another programmer or curator or something, and I do forget to do this sometimes, but like send them your new work. Like they don't have time always to go out and seek and find things. So there might be people who are looking for exactly what you're doing, but they don't know that you're doing it. And so, the more people that you talk to about it and just be like free to share that thing, then the more likely something will happen from that. Like I might send the film to to a programmer and just say, hey, here's my new project, or this is what I'm working on, just reaching out. But and maybe nothing will happen, but in 6 months something will happen, or 3 years later something will happen. You have to, communicate what you're doing with people and just stay in contact with folks about that. So it's not really like a self-promotion. It's just like sending out the information into the world so that the world can answer your wishes.
Well, thank you all so much. We're at time now, so I guess I invite you all, if there are more questions, to reach out to anybody individually, come have conversations. We're still here for the rest of the afternoon, I think, milling around, and some maybe this evening. So thank you all for coming to listen to this amazing panel, and thank you all for participating in this panel.